Hi, welcome to Pamela Price Unfiltered. I'm your host, Pamela Price, and this is the space and the place for real talk. This podcast is all about raw, unfiltered conversations on politics, law, culture, education, systemic racism, and current events shaping our world. My goal is to help you navigate the complexities of today's world. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel to watch the show and to my Substack to read the weekly word. Your support keeps the conversation raw and unfiltered. And you can also listen to Pamela Price Unfiltered wherever you get your podcasts. Welcome to the show. Let's talk about it. My guest today is George Galvis, a nationally respected leader in restorative justice, youth development, and community healing. Since 1993, George has worked to end cycles of violence and incarceration for system-impacted youth and communities of color. He is the co-founder and executive director of Communities United for Restorative Youth Justice, Courage, and a founding member of the California Alliance for Youth and Community Justice. He served as a commissioner for 8 years on the Alameda County Juvenile Justice Commission. Raised in Oakland and directly impacted by poverty, systemic violence, and incarceration as a teenager, George draws from personal experience and his indigenous heritage to inform his work. He holds a bachelor's degree in ethnic studies and a master's in city planning from UC Berkeley. George Galvis has been a leading voice in national efforts to dismantle the school-to-prison pipeline, develop alternatives to youth incarceration, and advance indigenous healing practices. He is a recipient of the California Peace Prize and has been recognized as a hometown hero by the Bay Area News Group and Comcast. At the heart of his work is his family, his greatest inspiration, and the driving force behind his lifelong commitment to justice, healing, and liberation. George, welcome to Pamela Price Unfiltered.
Thank you so much for having me. Humbled and honored to be your guest today.
Yes, it is my honor to have you. You're such a distinguished advocate and such a well-respected person in our community. And for those who don't know, we hope that they will know how hard you work and how much heart you bring to our community. So thank you.
Right on. Thank you. And I will just clarify that I've been in Oakland since 1996, but I was born and raised across the bridge, pre-gentrification, Frisco. And but I've been out here damn near 30 years in Oakland now, and Oakland is certainly where I planted my roots.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. Those of us that came here back, been here 30 plus years, we know we claim Oakland. It's a
That's
beautiful
right.
place. Yeah. So, we both have been on the front lines of criminal justice reform and in the conversation trying to shift the narrative about public safety and reform. And too often, what we see is that there's a conflict or a contrast. The people want to make the conflict between criminal justice reform and public safety. And it's really misleading to the public. So can you talk about how misleading that conversation has been?
So I think it's important to point out that 2019 was one of the very lowest crime rates we had seen in decades, like in nearly 50 years in California history, and in our Bay Area cities. It was phenomenal.
Mhm.
And then 2020 came, right? Pandemic, I think the isolation, the detachment, we saw increases in intimate partner violence and domestic violence. We saw kind of more incidences of just kind of road rage, some things like that, right? People were on edge during 2020. And we saw an increase in property crime. So we saw an increase from 2021 and 2021, and then we've seen a decrease since that time, since really 2022 to the present. So, but overall, crime has gone down. Now, I think the feeling that crime hasn't gone down is because the kinds of crimes that are being committed, right? And, for us working class folks living in working class communities, Black and brown folks, when we are seeing your car get bit, you know what I mean? Your window getting smashed, somebody trying to come up on loot, and maybe there's nothing in your car. Maybe there's something, or your catalytic converter getting stolen. I mean, that can cost us, like my wife's catalytic converter got stolen. I think I had to drop like 5 racks or more on just that catalytic converter. It was worth more than the car. Her car is an old ass car, you know what I'm saying? So,
I do.
you know, it's like it's a 2007 Honda, you know what I mean?
Right.
So it was like worth the value of the car. It's really, really frustrating because, you know, we ain't got it like that. You know what I
Right.
mean? So the
Mm-hmm.
sense that crime is going up and and I think the frustration when it does occur, because the people being impacted are people who are just struggling to get by, I think is real, very, very real, and it's felt. But I think it's important to acknowledge serious crime, violent crime, homicides has been going down, right? I think it's also interesting to point out that the speed of misinformation at this time is like 1,000 times faster than the speed of truth. And it's very much connected to social media, the algorithms for social media. And we have to begin to really, I think there's a lot of thought provoking questions about who designs these algorithms. They're not necessarily folks who come from our communities. And a lot of these algorithms and things that are evolving in technology, such as artificial intelligence, well, they have the same implicit bias as their creators. And so if you have people who come from Midwest, suburbia, white, middle class, or upper middle class backgrounds who have a lot of preconceived notions about black and brown folks, you know, that's going to be reflected in some of these algorithms and some of these things as well, right? And there's a leaning towards the right. There's a leaning. It's affected our elections. It's affecting democracy at this point in time. There's something that people need to be really kind of cognizant about in terms of just how techno authoritarianism is developing in this age of fascism and the role of technology and surveillance. And so it should be very frightening, but they're controlling people's thoughts. You know what I mean? People are being brainwashed and indoctrinated, you know what I mean, to
Yes.
rationalize the irrational, defend
Mm-hmm.
the indefensible, and spew out just misinformation as if they're truth and factual. You know what I mean? And
Yes.
so we're seeing that reflected in political recalls. They're coming after the character of California. California has been a predominantly super majority, and I'll just be real clear that I'm not a fan of the duopoly, the bipart, you know, the two-party system. Um, you know, I think it's safe to say very clearly in no uncertain terms that at this point the Republican Party is the new Nazi party. It's the white extremist, white supremacist, fascist party. But I understand why many people are frustrated with the alternative, right? Because it's a very corporatist party that hasn't necessarily served the needs and been responsive to Black and Brown communities or working class people either, right?
Right.
And so I just need to kind of say that as a disclaimer. But here in California, we've had a supermajority in terms of a Democratic governor, attorney general, lieutenant governor, legislature, both on the assembly and on the Senate side. And yet, we're the fourth largest economy in the world. If we ceded from the rest of the nation, if California became its own independent country, we'd be the fourth largest economy in the world. So there's a lot to be desired in terms of trying to control California. And I say all of that to provide context that there is an attempt, there's an effort by the ultra right-wing fascist extremists. And we've already seen the tech billionaires bend the knee at a financial interest, at a self-interest to take over California, to flip California, to make California a red state. And
Absolutely.
so, you know, that's something we need to talk about in terms of how they are buying our elections by influencing people's thinking with misinformation through social media, through advertising, and so many other things at this moment, right?
Right.
And it's threatening to our democracy, and it should be frightening, absolutely frightening to everybody.
Right. So the question is, how do we keep people from being vulnerable to that? One of the things that troubles me is how vulnerable and how I felt like I had a responsibility, and certainly as a politician, to inoculate people against the misinformation. But how do you do that? And how do you continue to do that when there's so much of it?
So let me say that I'm not the kind of person to ever sort of like kiss up to elected officials, right? or you know, blow smoke at anybody's, you know what I'm saying? I'm not that person. People who know me know that. You did exactly what you said you were going to do.
Yes.
You did exactly what we elected you to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so we saw the recall begin for you before you were even sworn in.
Yep.
And it wasn't necessarily about any policy practice. It wasn't about there being an increase in crime. Had nothing to do with anything about what you, except that what you represented, which was challenging extremely powerful players and challenging sort of the racist criminal legal system and the way that it's been used to subordinate Black and brown communities, right? So one of the things you committed to do was to really take slow consideration before any young person could be considered to be charged as an adult, right?
Absolutely.
And what I can say is if people want to really also just do a comparative analysis, we can go back to the previous DA before you were elected, Nancy O'Malley. And she came from a family of Irish law enforcement officers. I think her brother, her uncle, her grandma, everybody in her family was law
Her
enforcement.
father.
You know what I mean? Her pop, everybody, right? Like she came from a law enforcement family through and through. And nobody ever challenged her, accused her of being soft on crime. But if we look at the number of young people who were charged in Alameda County as adults between 2013 until the present, it was only about 3 cases, right? Only about 3 cases. And that includes like you were in office for about a year before the recall occurred, right? So
2
we're
years.
looking at Nancy O'Malley's track record
Mm-hmm.
as well for a long period of time. Well, in just a very short period of time, we have someone who was not elected. They were not elected by the voters of Alameda County. They were appointed to serve as district attorney. And we have seen already, it was up to 6 about a month ago. And at this point, it looks like it's gone up. If I'm not mistaken, it's already 8 in a very short period of time, in just a matter of months. 8 young people that they plan to pursue adult transfer hearings on in Alameda County. So everybody should be scratching their head like, well, wait a minute, that didn't even happen under Nancy O'Malley. That's not just some hug a thug, you know, soft on crime. You know what I mean? Like people who know, and this is why education is so important, understand the brain science, that the brain is not fully developed until the age of 25, the full frontal lobe. And if you have experienced trauma and are survivor trauma, and here's what I know to be true as someone who's previously incarcerated, I don't know anybody who's been incarcerated that is not a survivor of trauma. Hurt people, but heal people, heal people. And we operate from the fundamental belief that all, I think, reasonable experts in brain science and in behavioral therapy understand is that young people can be rehabilitated. So we treat them separately in the criminal legal system, right?
That's why it exists, right? That's absolutely
Exactly.
why it exists. That's why the legislature passed SB 1391. You had to stop people. You can't even charge a child under the age of 15 or the age of 16 as an adult. You can't do it because of the brain science. I mean, you just can't do it. It's so absolutely what you're, and it's unconscionable. And that's what I'm saying. People are not educated. They've been overwhelmed with a lot of false narrative about what's really going on. So how do we overcome that?
I think that we have our work cut out for us to educate our people. And, you know, it's the political education, but it's popular education too. I mean, we are still uncovering bodies of Black and brown boys who were murdered, disappeared while they were in juvenile detention all across the country. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the legacy of abuse and cruelty, of murder of our children while in state custody, you know, is very, very strong. And it's something that continues to haunt us because there's still, like I said, like I think it was just a week ago, they just uncovered some more graves, right? And so we've seen this all around the nation. We cannot return to the antiquated, archaic, barbaric system of criminalization of youth. And even going back to these already disproven sort of tropes, like the super predatory youth back in the day. You know what I mean? So we need to have a fundamental belief. And when I know this to be true, I've traveled all over the world, and I draw my own indigenous roots. I've been to Africa, and I know this to be true for African people, for indigenous people. And I think really from all core people from all four corners of the world, we have a fundamental belief that our young people are sacred, that they're a blessing, that they have a sacred purpose. And if they don't fulfill that purpose, is that their failure or is that our failure as a society? And so here in California, I talked a little bit earlier about us being the fourth largest economy in the world. Well, while we were number one in prison spending for decades, we were almost last. We were the 49th in education spending. In education spending, in terms of what we paid per student, we were almost dead last. And yet we love to pop our collar about California exceptionalism and wag our finger at those backward southern states and Midwest Rust Belt states, you know what I mean? But we were second to last in education spending. And budgets are reflections of values.
Right.
Imagine had we flipped that script. Imagine the kind of California we might be experiencing right now.
Yeah.
In preparing our young people to become the future leaders, the innovators. I mean, there's so much genius. And I can tell you, as someone who's been incarcerated, there's so much genius that is locked up right now. And who ends up losing out when we incarcerate that genius?
Right. Right.
It doesn't just destabilize that individual or their family. It destabilizes our communities and our society.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's why I was such a strong advocate for reentry and really talk about rehabilitation, especially the ability to rehabilitate a young person in the juvenile system is immense, because you're not losing that life. You're not losing that child's potential. You're actually preserving something, as you say, that is absolutely sacred. And it's on us to preserve it. And then, once folks are in the adult system, there's all sorts of trauma that then again, we have a duty when they're coming home. We got to make sure people are coming home safe, that they have the ability to be reintegrated is on us. It's our responsibility.
Absolutely. The other point I want to make is one of the other things that you campaigned on and you fulfilled your commitment during the time that you were our district attorney was holding abusive police officers accountable. Right?
Right.
And what we've seen is this pattern of impunity where police can murder, the evidence is there, it's on camera, and there's still no accountability. Right. And what we need to really shift is that no one is above the law.
Right.
And if we want to create a society in which there's accountability, then that means we have to begin with those people who are actually charged with enforcing the law. And if anything, when they have that power, like there's a higher standard.
Right.
Same way that there's a gang enhancement, maybe there needs to be an enhancement for those who actually abuse their authority. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because let's be real, what a gang enhancement is racial profiling, camouflage of the guys at crime prevention. You know what I mean? Some people had little leagues, some people had scouts or whatever else in their neighborhood. Some of us, all we had was our neighborhood, and don't criminalize me because of my zip code. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So, when those people, when individuals have a badge and they have a gun and they have authority and they abuse that, there needs to be a higher standard and there should be enhancements, in my opinion. But enhancement, let alone even just any kind of accountability. Like we saw, we saw Johannes Meserly on camera murdering, Oscar Grant execution style, and he ended up doing a few, just months. He did less time than Michael Vick's did for fighting dogs.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So we've seen this new DA drop every case that was pending from your office.
Right.
From the sheriffs to the Alameda police officers who murdered Mario Gonzalez, right? And at the time that Mario was murdered, many people compared his case to George Floyd. It was another case of I can't breathe. And some, what we started saying in the movement or referring to is he was George Floyded. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so
just like Vanetta Martin, killed or died in Santa Rita County Jail. To me, Vanetta Martin was our Sandra Bland.
That part.
You know,
That
we brought those cases. We had the opportunity to look at the evidence. And the reality is the only check on the power of the sheriff, and you're absolutely right. These are the people who have power really entrusted in them. The only people who can actually hold the sheriff accountable is the district attorney's office.
That's right.
You know, that is part, for me, it was part of the legacy of Earl Warren. Earl Warren, when he was a district attorney in 1924, he created the inspectors division inside the DA's office. Why? Because he wanted to be able to investigate and prosecute the sheriff. And the Board of Supervisors authorized that on that basis. And he was not afraid to prosecute the sheriff's deputies. If you don't have a DA that's willing to prosecute the sheriff, or a DA that has actually been bought and paid for by the sheriff, that's a real problem.
So District Attorney Ursula Jones Dixon, who I want to remind folks was not elected by the voters of Alameda County, was appointed, says that if it were up to her, she would bring back the death penalty.
Oh my God.
That I'm not certain. I don't want to be misquoted, but I believe that she may have said something to the effect of executing children who commit homicides, right? But I don't know I don't want to say that with absolute certainty. But my point is that she has some very extremist views, and she is all about supposedly law and order, tough on crime, except when it comes to police. So if police commit crimes, or if big corporations commit crimes, it's all good in the hood. Because I want to talk about something else that she did. I want to talk about radius recyclery.
Okay.
All right.
So let's talk about radius recyclery.
Let's talk about it, because there was already a case in which there was a $4-point-something million settlement. They were a serial offender, compromising the air quality and the health of the West Oakland community. And you have to understand, West Oakland, like one of my OGs is Miss Margaret Gordon, co-founder of West Oakland Environmental Indicators Project. So I know a little something about what's going on over there. And she's been advocating because of proximity to the Port of Oakland. And people in West Oakland already have compromised respiratory systems because of the diesel air contaminants that come in as a result of the proximity to the port and all the other things that are happening. And now you have Radius Recyclery, who has violated the law, has been a serial offender, criminal charges, that Assembly Member Mia Bonta, spouse of our state Attorney General, Rob Bonta, agreed that these criminal charges should have been advanced and should not have been dropped. And yet this non-elected appointed district attorney drops the criminal charges on Radius Recycling. What happened to being law and order? What happened to being tough on crime? Is it only for working class Black and brown folks? Is it only for children? When we do not hold those who have badges and those who have corporate power, who abuse their positions and commit crimes. It seems like a double standard.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. The grand jury, the criminal grand jury that issued that indictment, and the judge that approved that indictment, that evidence was there. And our new DA came in and without, any real time to evaluate the case, just said, oh, I'm going to dismiss this case. And that's not accountability. It's not accountability for the corporation, for the corporate defendants, the managers, or for the community. It just is not. Yeah.
So I want to just say that it's very clear to me that this new non-elected appointed DA is not really about law and order. It's not really about tough on crime. It's a just us system, not a justice system.
Yeah.
Just us that have money and power.
But that's what it appears to be.
The rest of us, let's lock them up, throw away the key. Let's bring back the death penalty and execute them if it were up to her. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I know that Alameda County deserves better. We deserve better.
For Alameda County has consistently voted overwhelmingly. I think it was 74%. When we had a chance to vote on the death penalty, we voted no death penalty. When we had a chance to vote, on not charging juveniles as adults. 77% said do not vote in favor of Prop 57. We have to stop prosecutors from charging juveniles as adults. Do we still hold that value? That's the question.
I believe that Alameda County voters do. I do believe that people are frustrated, as I said earlier. People, there's a lot of trash on the streets. The rent is too damn high, so you have a lot of houseless encampments. When there's no infrastructure, then people relieve themselves, urinating, defecating on the streets, and it's unsightly. It affects the health of the community and the environment. But let's talk about what that means when the rent is too damn high. When the rent is too damn high, the people are forced to live in tents. And then we see these sweeps just destroying what little they have, their ability to cook for themselves, the little porta potties they might have created. What are their options? What are people supposed to do? Like at this point, we're criminalizing poverty, but what are we going to do? Put them all in jail, in Santa Rita jail? Well, let's talk about what the cost of that would be. Exactly. To incarcerate one person in Alameda County jail is at least $100,000 a year. Are you saying that we'd rather spend $100,000 a year to incarcerate them in Santa Rita jail than actually provide viable housing opportunities and support, whether it be mental health or job placement or training or whatever it is they need? And I think it's important to point out that there's this underlying assumption that majority of those folks are either neurodivergent, which is a fancy term for people who have mental health challenges, right? Or drug users. Well, they did a poll in Los Angeles of Skid Row, and I bet you the same applies here in Oakland. But in Los Angeles, Skid Row, they found 70% of the people living in the 10 cities there were working poor. They worked jobs like McDonald's and Walmart. The same people who invested in Prop 36 and tough on crime that are claiming that retail theft is driving down business as opposed to online shopping. You know what I mean?
Right. Exactly.
Are crying a river, but yet they have no evidence that that's actually really the case. Those folks who we subsidize with corporate welfare, because when you apply for a job at Walmart, they also give you an application for food stamps and Medi-Cal because they're not providing those things to their employees. You know what I'm saying? So that should tell you everything in terms of who's really robbing from the people. You know what I mean? But the same corporations that supported Prop 36 and are supporting this kind of criminalization, you know what I mean? What are people supposed to do? Like if we only just invested in people, if we invested in community-based safety responses, mental health and housing, I guarantee you it would do three things. One, it would fundamentally change the trajectory of these individuals, right? Because now some people, when you sweep their tent, they have no way to cook or do anything. What's left? People still need to eat. And that forces them into the underground economy, right? Yep. Two, it would address root causes of crime. Like public safety can't just be dependent, like trying to incarcerate and police your way into public safety is an oxymoron akin to trying to bomb your way into peace. It's nonsensical, right? And lastly, I guarantee you it would cost less. It would cost less to actually empower and support people than it would be to incarcerate them. And that's the trajectory we're on right now when we are criminalizing people for their poverty and for being houseless.
Yeah, Alameda County is going backwards, but it's the institutions. It's not the people, because the people are woke enough to know that the things that you're talking about are you speaking truth for sure. I want to cover one more thing before we have to go, and that's what's happening with. We are one of the most diverse counties in the country. Like I think 53% of the children in our county live in a household where there's multiple language spoken, wherever they come from. Okay. So we got a problem with ICE. We just heard ICE went into a courtroom or went into a courthouse and arrested somebody. We know that the governor's trying to make sure they don't troll our streets with masks on, and the feds are saying, oh no, they're gonna do it anyway. So tell us what's happening with ICE in Alameda County. And how do we protect our population, our residents?
So a couple thoughts. One, Alameda County is a sanctuary county. Oakland is a sanctuary city. What does that actually mean? Is that just performative? Are we going to sing it or are we going to bring it? You know what I mean? And our sheriff had said that there's zero cooperation happening with the Department of Homeland Security and with ICE. And guess what? Our sheriff lied. Our sheriff lied. They have $1 million contract. They get $1 million a year from Department of Homeland Security to share data.
Wow.
To share data about every person who is detained in Santa Rita jail. And that data, of course, is to help Homeland Security determine people's documentation status. So to say there's zero cooperation is just untrue. It is a lie. It is a blatant, bold-faced lie. And I think Alameda County residents should demand that that contract be dropped immediately. Immediately. We also need to invest more in infrastructure and resources. And I think it's really important because one of the things that we are oftentimes defeated by is classic divide and conquer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The oppressor really knows how to pit different folks against each other. You know what I mean? And so when we talk about the issue of immigration, it's important to understand that while we predominantly see it here in California as a brown issue, some of the most mistreated migrants in our nation are Black migrants, Haitian, African, the Caribbean, right? And the other thing is solidarity. We need to have solidarity because who they're coming for today, best believe they're coming for you tomorrow. They ain't got no love for Black, Indigenous, people of color, for LGBTQ, for working class people, poor people. You know what I mean? So best believe that they're going to come for you next. And so we're trying to create our own sort of modern day underground railroad. There's things I'd love to talk about, but I think at this moment in time, some things are better left unsaid. What I can say is we have created some sanctuary spaces. I should say that in the event that there is an ICE raid and a militarization of our community, there are buildings and spaces, including my center, which our relatives will be welcomed in, and then it's gonna become interesting after that because we're not seeing that ICE is going back to law and order. It's interesting how this administration and ICE and Homeland Security are not following law and order. They are not following lawful, due process. We have seen every person who was at so-called Alligator Alcatraz has disappeared. There's no record. We have no idea what happened to these folks. We've seen them ignore court orders. Literally, who gets to do that? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like without being held in contempt of court. Right. And so they're violating the law. They don't have warrants in many cases. And so, it's going to be interesting. Now, my question is local law enforcement going to uphold the law? Is California passed this unmasking policy? Are they going to arrest these folks who are masked up? Are we going to see that? I tell you, I don't think so. And the reason why is because they're all part of the same system. So for those who want to believe that like our local law enforcement are the allies and are going to defend or protect us against Homeland Security and ICE and this militarization and National Guard and these things. And let's be very real. This is strategically targeting cities with Black leadership. Show me one city that's been targeted that does not have a Black mayor or Black leadership.
Right.
This is very much racialized. This is very much a white supremacist agenda to undermine. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So, that's what it's about. And it's going to require those of us who have a little bit of privilege. Like if you ain't on paperwork, probation or parole, if you were US born, we need to stand up and we need to show up for our relatives who are, a little more vulnerable.
Right.
And the thing that's really important in this moment in the fight against fascism is we cannot give in to fear. Fear is the enemy. And so we can oppress by our silence, Silence is not an option at this moment. We have to stand up. We have to fight. We want to be good ancestors. You know what I mean? Think about how you want to be remembered by your children, your grandchildren, your great grandchildren. And one of the things I'll close by saying is I'm blessed and honored as a co-founder of All of Us and None to have a lot of OGs who came from the Black Panther Party. And I run into people sometimes in events and at different social mixers and conferences. And I roll with some of my OGs sometimes. And I can't tell you how many folks tell me, oh, I used to be a Panther. And I'll be like, really? Well, guess what? My OG here was a Panther. And I call him over. I'm not going to name names and put anybody on Front Street right now, but I'll call him over and I say, guess what? They say they were a Panther too. And he says, really? Which chapter? Who was your field commander? And he starts asking questions, and then they start stuttering, get red faced, and they walk away. Why? Because they lied. Is that the kind of person you want to be when you stand, later on that you got to lie about what your role was, what position you played in the fight against fascism, against white supremacy in this moment? Or do you want to be able to say truthfully that you stood up for justice and that you were an honorable ancestor?
All right. Well, on that, Unfiltered. Thank you, George Galvis, so much for your perspective and for joining me on Pamela Price Unfiltered.
Thank you so much for having me. Blessings to you.
Welcome to Legally Speaking. There is a major legal drama playing out behind the scenes of the Charlie Kirk Game of Thrones, and that is the unleashing of political prosecutions by Donald Trump's Department of Justice. Trump has its enemies list. Attorney General Leticia James and former FBI Director James Comey are at the top of that list. Both of them happen to be connected to the Eastern District of Virginia. Eric Siebert, the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, was just fired. Prior to joining the Department of Justice, Mr. Siebert was a police officer with the Washington, D.C. Metropolitan Police Department. He comes from one of the most well-connected Republican families in the state of Virginia. His father-in-law is a former U.S. Attorney and State Attorney General. Eric Siebert started with the Eastern District of Virginia as an assistant U.S. attorney in 2010 and was assigned to the office for 15 years. He was appointed by Donald Trump in January to serve as the interim U.S. attorney. In May, Trump nominated him for the permanent position. After that, however, Eric Siebert let it be known that he did not have sufficient evidence to bring charges against Attorney General Leticia James. That case against Attorney General James depends on a tortured interpretation of a mortgage loan document for a house her niece purchased in Richmond, Virginia. The house happens to be in Eric Siebert's district. Siebert concluded that he did not have sufficient evidence also to indict former FBI Director James Comey for perjury. Trump's response was to fire Eric Siebert. When asked about him, Trump said he wanted him out because of the position of Virginia's two Democratic senators who supported his nomination. Quote, when I saw that he got approved by those two men, I said, pull it, because he can't be any good, Trump said. When I learned that they voted for him, I said, I don't really want him. Eric Siebert is a lifelong Republican who comes from a prominent Republican family. The fact that two Democratic senators supported his nomination is a total ruse. The real and only reason he was fired is because he wanted to follow the law and not Donald Trump. Trump then appointed one of his personal attorneys, Lindsay Halligan, a former insurance attorney, to take over the DOJ office for the Eastern District of Virginia. Halligan followed Trump's bidding and moved immediately to present evidence to a grand jury to indict former FBI Director James Comey. What will be the fallout? For Comey, he has already had to hire a lawyer and will have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to defend himself. For Attorney General James, she will likely have to step away from her position as Attorney General if she's indicted, leaving a void in the prosecution's cases against Trump. Donald Trump's tactics will undermine the rule of law in ways that are normally reserved only for working class Black or brown folks. never against the lawyers. Targeting Leticia James and James Comey or even Senator Adam Schiff as part of the playbook to destabilize our society and demonize anyone who stands in the way of a fascist authoritarian regime. It brings to mind the famous line, "The first thing we do, let's kill all the lawyers." So many people have said to me, I never even heard of Charlie Kirk before he was killed. If you were not part of Donald Trump's world before he was elected or someone involved in the media, you might not have even heard of Charlie Kirk. Most of us did not know that Kirk was responsible for Trump's decision to pick J.D. Vance as his vice president, or that there was this young white supremacist organizing young people to support Donald Trump. Who knew? Well, Donald Trump and J.D. Vance knew. That's why they are just devastated that he was shot and killed. And they want a national holiday in his honor. To be clear, Charlie Kirk should not have been killed. As someone who was targeted with hate and death threats and called every kind of racist, sexist name on social media by small-minded people for 2 years, I know that political violence is real and dangerous. As someone who has been sounding the alarm about gun violence for more than 20 years, I know that the threat of deadly gun violence is real. I also know that Charlie Kirk should not have been spreading hate toward anyone who is not a straight white male. As many have said, while we can condemn the way that he died, we should not excuse the way that he lived or the many despicable things that he said and did. Charlie Kirk was a proponent for America's gun culture, someone who targeted professors with whom he disagreed and condoned deadly political violence against the United States government on January 6, 2021, against everyday citizens, against elected Democrats tragically murdered in Minnesota and elsewhere. He regularly attacked LGBTQ persons, suggesting that they should be stoned and calling a trans woman an abomination to God. Charlie Kirk was a staunch anti-abortionist, denying women any right to agency over their own body. In a debate, he stated that if his 10-year-old daughter was raped and became pregnant, he would force her to deliver the baby. Charlie Kirk claimed that the Democratic Party was trying to replace white Americans with immigrants in order to win elections. Based on this great replacement theory, conspiracy theory, he urged the Trump administration to deport as many immigrants as possible. He believed that immigrants are, quote, poisoning the blood of our country, that Nazi phrase. He reportedly complained to J.D. Vance that Donald Trump was not capturing and expelling immigrants fast enough. Charlie Kirk vilified critical race theory and the legacy of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Kirk said that celebrating Dr. King's legacy is wrong. And in 2024, he launched a crusade to discredit Dr. King and the Civil Rights Act of 1964. According to Charlie Kirk, white privilege is a myth, George Floyd was a scumbag, and DEI programs were unfair to white citizens who never received any advantages based on their race. Charlie Kirk stated that former First Lady Michelle Obama, Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, media personality Joy Reid, and the late Congresswoman Shirley Lee Jackson did not have the brain processing to be able to be taken seriously. They had to go steal a white person's slot to be taken somewhat seriously. His comments in 2024 about New York City Council member Yusef Salaam were some of the most racist things that Kirk ever said or did. In 2024, he labeled council member Salaam a rapist and published false claims that the council member was in fact guilty of gang raping a jogger in Central Park in 1989. Charlie Kirk called Councilmember Salaam a disgusting pig. Councilmember Salaam is one of the Central Park Five, who was exonerated in 2002 and received millions of dollars from the city and the state of New York for his wrongful conviction and incarceration. In fact, a serial rapist named Matthias Reyes confessed to the crime in 2002. Reyes' confession was confirmed by DNA evidence from the scene of the crime. Before Reyes confessed, there had never been a DNA match to any of the Central Park Five. Their story is chronicled in the 2019 crime drama When They See Us. None of that information, however, stopped Charlie Kirk from calling council member Salam a gang rapist and a disgusting pig. Charlie Kirk's value to Donald Trump and the MAGA movement was his willingness as a podcaster and a private citizen to speak the most demeaning racist comments about Black people and immigrants that white supremacists wanted to hear and spread across this country. His ability to rally young people to embrace white supremacy was supposedly his contribution. At least one commentator has reported, however, that Charlie Kirk was a failure. His mission to create a wave of young white supremacists failed. According to research, the numbers of younger voters who turned out in 2024 and voted Republican went down, and the number of total votes went down, although Donald Trump did gain a larger share of the youth vote. Writer Michael Harriot wrote these words: Charlie Kirk did not build a political miracle. He profited from a white constructed narrative that has zero actual basis in facts. He did not debate. He propagandized. He did not espouse Christian values. He did not love his gay, Black, and trans neighbors as he loved himself. He persuaded no one. The only people who believe Charlie Kirk wasn't a racist are his fellow racists. In the wake of Charlie Kirk's murder, the politicians who want to weaponize his death and celebrate his legacy of hatred and racism are the ones that we should be watching now and going forward. Thanks for tuning in to Pamela Price Unfiltered. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And please sign up this month as a founding member or a paid subscriber to my Substack newsletter to read the weekly word from Pamela Price Unfiltered. Your support keeps the conversation raw and unfiltered. And you can also listen to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts. I don't know that I wake up.